Well, if you sat there with your Bible open at Ruth, which I hope you are, put a bookmark in it, because we're going to turn today to Leviticus. We're going to look at this issue of redemption. So we're in Leviticus chapter 25, and I'm going to start at verse 25. So Leviticus 25:25. It says this. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. If, however, there's no one to redeem it for them, but later on they prosper and acquire sufficient means to redeem it themselves, they are to determine the value for the year since they sold it and refund the balance to the one to whom they sold it. They can then go back to their own property. But if they do not acquire the means to repay what was sold, will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and they can then go back to their property. And now I'm going to read from verse 47. If a foreigner residing among you becomes rich, and any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to the foreigner or to a member of the foreigner's clan, they retain the right of redemption after they have sold themselves. One of their relatives may redeem them. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative in their clan may redeem them. Or if they prosper, they may redeem themselves. They and their buyer are to count the time from the year they sold themselves up to the year of Jubilee. The price for their release is to be based on the rate paid to a hired worker for that number of years. If many years remain, they must pay for their redemption a larger share of the price paid for them. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, they are to compute that and pay for the redemption accordingly. They are to be treated as workers hired from year to year. You must see to it that those to whom they owe service do not rule over them ruthlessly. Even if someone is not redeemed in any of these ways, they and their children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites belong to me as servants. They are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. I am the Lord, your God. And God will bless his word to us. So, verse 25 said, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they've sold. In our reading yesterday, it was good to see that Naomi, after all her gloom when she returned to Bethlehem, and ascribing to the Lord her misfortunes, now sees that God hasn't abandoned her. In Ruth 2 verse 20 she says, he has not stopped showing his kindness to the living and the dead. And the he there might possibly be construed to be Boaz, but according to my commentary, it's much more likely to mean God. Naomi had clung to her faith in the Lord, even though she felt he'd brought a misfortune. Now she was starting to see that God was at work for her good. What joy that must have brought her. Naomi said of Boaz, that man is our close relative. He's one of our guardian redeemers. So in order to understand what's going to come next, the time has come to see what that actually means about being a guardian redeemer. To redeem is to buy back. In our reading today from Leviticus, we see the basis for what was in Naomi's mind. One of the things that made Israel and its people different to other countries at that time is that the land was the Lord's, and the people too were his servants because he'd rescued them from slavery in Egypt. And the land was divided up according to tribes and families. Neither the land nor the people could be sold permanently. If someone became poor and had to sell some land, their nearest relative was to redeem it, buy it back. If no one could, it would still return to the original family in the year of Jubilee, which came round every 50 years. Boaz was a close relative and hence a possible redeemer. And tied in with the events that are to ensue is also the command of Deuteronomy 25, verse 5. But if brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his brother is to marry the widow and have children who will carry on the dead brother's name. Now that's not exactly the situation here, but it seems that this principle was going to be applied nevertheless. Let's pray. Father, thank you that you've not stopped showing kindness to me either, even if I've felt that way at times. Thank you for my Redeemer, Jesus. In his name, amen.